Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 10 shows of 2023. So this is a once a year annual video that I have been doing for quite some time now. I can't remember how many videos I've done, maybe 7. Anyway, we're at the end of the year. I count down my favorite shows of the year, my top 10 favorite shows of the year. So usually when I do this, I watch like about maybe 26. It's somewhere between 22 and 30 shows in a year. The last couple of years it's been more like 22 or 26, but there have been a couple of years where I watched like 30 shows. And then I pick the ones that I like the best and do my top 10. However, this year, for a multitude of reasons, there not being that many shows I actually wanted to watch, and just being super busy. And the busier you are, the more sort of selective you are with the shows you watch. And the point is, I only watched 16 shows this year, and I am going to talk about all 16 in this video, which is not something that usually happens. Usually there's like a lot of shows that I watch that I don't mention in my end of year video because there's just too many of them, but not as many this time. And so this year is not one of those sort of high selections, although I will be fair, like throughout most of the year I thought that there wouldn't be that many good shows in my top 10, and I'd have to like scramble to shove shows in my top 10. But by the end of the year, there was actually quite a few good shows. I have my number 1 gets a 10 out of 10, but that's the only 10 out of 10 I have on my list. But I have 5 9s, which is fairly good, and my top 10 starts at 8, which is also my 8 rated shows, which is also very good because there were some years I had to slip in a few 7 rated shows in my top 10. Last year I had like maybe 5 shows that got a 10 out of 10. So this isn't as good, strong as a selection as last year, but as I said, hadn't watched as many shows, and there weren't that many shows that I wanted to watch. And I will call out a couple of shows right off the bat that you won't see in mine, because usually in my top 10s, like, just because the show's not on my list or I didn't mention in my video doesn't mean I didn't watch it, but on this video it does mean that. So if you're like, oh, what about this show? Then the answer is I didn't watch it, because all the shows I watched this year. Now I usually get the disclaimer about the eligibility of shows that if they ended in 2023, even if they started in 2022, they're eligible, and shows that start in 2023 but didn't end, or not going to end until 2024, aren't eligible. But there aren't really any examples of that. I think this is the first year I didn't have any examples of that, so that would be the case, but it didn't really apply to anything. But yeah, as I was gonna mention right off the bat, a few shows that I didn't watch, that some people might thought I watched because they're quite popular amongst these kind of spaces. And Invincible Season 2, I didn't like Invincible Season 1. I thought it should have been a one-off season, and I have no interest in watching more of it. And then there was what else was there? Oh, the Boys spinoff, Gen V. I've given up on the Boys. I abandoned the Boys. Not interested in them anymore because, again, I feel like it was a finite story that should have ended, and it keeps going, and it's gonna keep going forever. Like The Walking Dead, I have no interest in that, so I'm jumping ship now. And there's also the One Piece live action Netflix show. I watched like the first half of the first episode, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It was just way too silly for me. I'm sorry. I'm just not an anime fan, and it was just way too... I was just like, I can't do it. I just couldn't do it. I heard it was good, but I don't know. I just don't think it's for me. That's the impression I get from... Anyway, so let's go ahead and get to the shows that I did watch. We're going to start with my top 2 most disappointing shows of the year. Now, typically I did 3, And sometimes I just did one, but this year there's two. So, two most disappointing shows of the year. I'll start with my number two, which is Secret Invasion. I was expecting more because it was supposed to be a big deal and everyone was making a big deal out of it with, Nick Fury is in it and it's going to be this huge, Marvel deal. But it wasn't a big deal. It was kind of a letdown. They didn't really have any other Marvel superheroes in it like they did in the comics. And Nick Fury was kind of a putz in the show. It wasn't our Nick Fury. In fact, when you go watch the Marvels, it seems like a totally different character in the Marvels. Like the real Nick Fury's in the Marvels. I don't know who the fuck is in this. Just some washed up old man. They trying to do the washed up old man trope because it's so hip to do nowadays. And then they're making him back to the badass Nick Fury. I don't want to see a washed up Nick Fury. And and then the show itself wasn't that interesting and the finale is really bad. So that's my second most disappointing show of the year. My number one most disappointing show of the year is Citadel, which, to be fair, I didn't watch the entire thing because I didn't watch the final episode. I watched right up to the final episode, and it really tells you how bad a show is when you don't have the motivation to watch the finale. It starred Rob Stark and Richard Matherson or whatever his name is, Rob Stark, and mainly the main reason why I was looking forward to the show and I thought it might be really good is because it was done by the showrunners are the Russo brothers, who did Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Avengers Endgame, two of the best movies of all time, I think, and definitely two of the best comic book movies of all time. Of course, they also did Civil War and Infinity Wars, which knocked them down a little bit, but they're still decent movies. So I thought that this show would be at least halfway decent with those guys in charge, but it was just it was too silly, it was too dumb. It was like Mission Impossible meets John Wick meets, I don't know, fantasy. I don't know. It was too over the top for me, and it just got more ridiculous as it went on. So, yeah, it's a good old amnesia story. Anyway, so now, before I get to my top 10, I got another sort of award to mention. I want to get into the most overrated show of the year, which is not something I do every year, but occasionally, here and there. I've done it before. So this year, my pick for most overrated show of the year is Star Trek Picard Season 3. I thought it was okay. I gave it a 6 out of 10 ultimately. To me, Star Trek Picard was a very mixed bag. In the same vein as most seasons of Discovery and Season 1 of Picard. Because there were some things about it that were really amazing, such as tying up Roland's storyline. God damn, I loved that so much. And you have the other great character moments with the character. Worf was a delight. His chemistry with Raffi was really good. But then you had a lot of other dumb shit. You had the plot meander for the first 3 episodes. And then you had those 2-part finale, which is some of the worst, like up there with some of the worst episodes. Like, it was just felt like it was written by a 14-year-old. It was just so bad, bringing back the Borg in just the final 2-part. Like, why in the Borg Queen War? Like, and why would you justify say that the Borg were killed off in Endgame, which was never the case, and just a lot of member berries. The show relied way too much on nostalgia rather than storytelling. As I said, there was some good storytelling in it, so I was very mixed in the show. Yet there was a lot of people were acting like it was the best thing ever. There was a lot of people saying it was the best, by far the only good modern Star Trek show. I'm sorry, Strange New Worlds is far superior to this show. And it was all about nostalgia. Some people were creaming their pants because, it's the Enterprise D, oh my god. I don't care. Tell good stories. Fuck's sake. Anyway, so that is my pick for most overrated show of the year. So now, let me get into my top 10 proper, and I will start with 3 honorable mentions because, as I said, I'm mentioning all 16 shows I watched this year. So first honorable mention that didn't quite make my top 10, The Bad Batch, Season 2. It's good. It was a good season. I liked it. I wasn't, like, super impressed with it. I wasn't like, oh, this is the best thing ever, but it was okay, I guess. Anyway, next honorable mention is Rabbit/Hole, or Rabbit Hole. This was a Paramount Plus show with Kiefer Sutherland, which it was a bit silly at times. It was definitely one of those espionage spy things that was a bit fantasy-like, but it was definitely better than Citadel, that's for sure. And had what's his face? Tywin Lannister. God, I can't even remember the actor's name. But anyway, he was good in it. And it was okay. It was a fun time, whatever. Anyway, and my final honorable mention, which I'm actually surprised didn't make my top 10, it was so close to making my top 10, was Yellow Jacket Season 2. Now, if this had been Season 1 of Yellow Jackets, it would have made my season, but I watched both seasons of Yellow Jacket this year, so Season 1 wasn't eligible for the year it came out in, and it didn't come out this year, so it's not eligible. Season 2, I didn't think was quite as strong. Mainly the present day storyline just didn't do it for me, just didn't work. However, I still overall liked the show. I still really attached to the characters. I love the musical choices, by the way. I love the soundtrack to the show. And, the 90s nostalgia. But there's story to go along with the nostalgia. And the character stories, particularly in the past storyline, is very strong. And I'm very interested to find out what happens in that past storyline. The present storyline needs to catch up. Anyway, now we will get into my top 10 proper, the shows that came out this year that did make my top 10, and I'll start with my number 10, Wheel of Time Season 2. So I wasn't that, eager to see this show. In fact, I kind of get the show mixed up in my head with, his Dark Materials and even a little bit of the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, because I don't know, they're all fantasy shows and sometimes I get them mixed up. And so I had to watch these recaps of Season 1 to remind myself of what happened. And then even then, when I started watching Season 2, I was so fucking lost. I was like, what in the hell is going on? I have no idea. So confused. But then after an episode or two, I sort of got the hang of it and picked it up. And I think fans of the books would probably enjoy this show a lot better than someone like me who hadn't read the books, because there's all these characters, and I watch these videos that were like, oh, this character is so awesome, the books are so important. And I'm like, I'm sure you're right, but in the show itself, just by watching the show, I don't know who this character is, and I don't care about them, and they just seem extra and unnecessary, and there's too many characters. And I know there's way more in the books, but that doesn't mean anything. Game of Thrones had too many characters, and there were way, way, way more characters in the books, so that doesn't mean anything. But anyway, but I really got into it towards the end of it. I think some of the storylines maybe did take a bit too long, did linger a bit too long. But some of them really did work for me. Particularly towards the end of the season, I think it really picked up, and I like the finale. I heard some people didn't like the finale. I like the finale. I thought it was pretty good. Maybe not the best thing ever, but pretty satisfying. Maybe a little bit rushed, maybe a little bit on the rush side, perhaps, but still, decent season, good season, Wheel of Time Season 2. So next, we will get into my number 9, which is Black Mirror Season 6. Now, this definitely, I think, is not one of my favorite seasons of Black Mirror. I think it was more horror-esque, and by horror, I don't just mean the 2 fantastical horror episodes. I mean, out of the 6 episodes, only one of the episodes is not horror. Now, granted, 3 of the episodes are the kind of horror that Black Mirror always does. So in other words, more thriller than horror, but I still call it horror. 2 of the episodes were straight out like monster horror, which is something that Black Mirror had never done before. But the entire season, except for the one episode that was making fun of Netflix, seemed more about, the thriller horror. I mean, you can't tell me that what was it called? The Lake, whatever, episode 2? That was totally a horror thriller. Completely horror episode. But anyway, so I'm not a huge fan of horror myself, but I do like Black Mirror's style of horror, but then they took it too far in those last 2 episodes, I think, maybe a little bit. And so this wasn't my favorite season, but there were still some things I liked about it. As always with Black Mirror, I liked some episodes more than others, and as always with Black Mirror, everyone disagrees with me with which episodes are good and which episodes are bad. For example, this is one episode that everyone loves that I hated. It was my least favorite of the season because I didn't like what they did with the ending. I think they needed to fix the ending in order, and it was too slow and prolonged. Like, they spent all this time like just wasting time, and then they cut the episode short. That irritates me. Cut all that unnecessary crap and give us a proper ending. But everyone, their mother disagrees with. Well, not everyone. Most people. Some people out there will agree with me. But then another episode, which everyone else says is the worst thing ever, the piece of shit, I actually thought it was kind of good. Even though it was the horror one, I thought, the character stories in it were good. I liked the commentary it had, so I actually kind of liked it, even though everyone else is saying it's the worst episode of Black Mirror. But that is very typical of Black Mirror. It's almost every season could be described thusly, although I will say this is, as I said, not one of my favorite seasons of Black Mirror, but still strong in its own right, and so makes number 9 in my top 10. So next we will get into my number 8, which I'm kind of sad that it ends up this low, but it does tell you that my top 10 did end up being kind of strong, that this show got knocked down all the way down to number 8, and that is Strange New Worlds Season 2. Now, personally, I did not think that Strange New Worlds Season 2 was as good as Season 1. Musical episode, anyone? I'm sorry. The musical episode does bring it down for me. Not that the whole concept of doing the musical episode ruins the season, but I'm not thrilled about the fact they decided to do a musical episode. I don't think it's necessary, and I think it's a bit of a cliche, or a bit of a sort of, not a lot of people saying, ooh, it's risky and it's outside the box. And it's risky for a good reason, because it's not a good idea. And when something's risky, there's a chance that you're not going to pull it off, and unfortunately they did not pull it off. It's not that it was a musical episode, it was that it was a bad musical episode. Now, a lot of people always point to all these other episodes in Star Trek and be like, oh, you can't say musical has never been in Star Trek, because all these episodes have musicals. First of all, most of the episodes suck, like Bada Bing Bada Bang and the one with the hippies of, was it Way to Eden? But there are some examples of good music pieces, like, for example, the Doctor singing Dr. Tinker Tenure Dr. Spy. That was amazing. But the thing is that this did not pull it off well. Just because there are other examples when they did pull it off well doesn't mean that they pulled it off well here, because they did not. And on top of that, it had a very cliche romantic comedy episode that apparently a lot of other people love, which I thought was terrible. The one where Spock becomes human, and they just didn't have as many great episodes as season 1 did. But don't get me wrong, it was still a strong season. They still had a lot of strong episodes that did work, like the season 1. The episode 1 with Spock. Oh, the trial episode with Una was amazing. I think better than Measure of Man, but I think that episode's a little bit overrated. And the crossover with Lower Decks was simply amazing. Easily the best episode of the show. So they did have some strong episodes. Just overall wasn't as cohesive or good of a season as season 1 was, but still number 8 on my top 10 of the year. So next we will get into my number 7, which I'm going to have everyone and their mother's going to disagree with me, but it's The Mandalorian Season 3. Now, a lot of people told me that, this season sucked, and I heard I'm so sick of people talking about how bad this season was. I liked it. Honestly, I think it was my favorite season of The Mandalorian, and maybe in that Season 2 in the same vein, because granted, I wish they had spent more time on the story of Mandalore instead of the side quests or whatever. Like at the start of the season, I didn't think it would be a good season, but they recouped. It definitely the through storyline, even though they could have spent more time with it, it was still awesome. It was still really good. It's still exactly what I wanted to see in The Mandalorian, with The Mandalorian and his relationship with Bo-Katan, and them forming the relationship and really taking Mandalore back. I mean, that's exactly what I wanted, and I thought that was fucking awesome when they did it. And I'm sorry, I liked that Jack Black episode. I thought it was good. Everyone else seems to hate it. I liked it. I don't care that they had Jack Black, and I never even heard of Lizzo, so it didn't bother me at all. So I actually really liked that episode. I thought that was a nice little side quest. But anyway, and the stuff they did with what's his face, Moff Gideon, at the end of this season was really amazing. That was good stuff. This is the kind of Star Wars I want to see. I just think people like to complain a lot. I don't know. Anyway, we'll get into my number 6, which again almost made my top 5. Just at the last second, it got knocked out of my top 5, and I was so sad. But it's Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4. Love this season. I think this was a great season of Lower Decks. Now, granted, it probably wasn't that much better than the previous season. It was probably on par with the previous season, which is unfortunate. I was hoping that it would step up and be even better, but there were a couple episodes that just lagged behind. But it was hilarious throughout. You had some really strong episodes. You had the through storyline with Mariner sort of not wanting to get promoted. And I love that they promoted the ensigns, by the way, at the very start of the season. They didn't fuck around. And I thought it was great. So they know that the show needs to progress, and they used Talin very well. Didn't like what they did with Tendi. That really bothered me. They kind of retconned her character in a way that I think lessens the character, and so I wasn't a fan of the cliffhanger of the season, but I liked the 2-part finale, especially the first part of it. I thought was absolutely amazing and touching, in the way that Lower Decks could be. And it brought back a couple characters I didn't like Peanut Hamper and Badgie, but it also brought back Agamus, who I love. I love Jeffrey Combs as his character. So yeah, overall, I would have to say it was a really good season. Really great season, in fact, but maybe just not to the level my ridiculously high expectations was hoping it would be. But still, good Star Trek. There's still good modern Star Trek on, regardless of what people say. So love me some Lower Decks. So next, I will get into my actual top 5 now, and we'll start with my number 5, which is The Last of Us Season 1. And I'm surprised that this is on here. I've never played the video game, never heard of it. In fact, when the show first came out, everyone and their mother was talking about it and trying to get me to watch it. It's like, you gotta watch this, I'll show you. And I was like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Whatever, it's just some dumb video game zombie show. Why would I want to watch that? But when I got sick and I had a month off work, I was like, oh, what the fuck, I might as well watch it. And I did. And I liked it. It was actually really, really good. They had this one episode that was kind of a side where they had these two characters who were a gay couple and then meeting in the apocalypse and sort of falling in love. I thought that was an amazing episode. That episode really, really sold me on the show. And then you had the rest of the tension. It started out really good. Like the first episode immediately like hooked me with Pedro Pascal, having his daughter killed, and then having this tenuous relationship with this other girl, and you had Carrie Coon in there. Like, it was really good. And then I think it did meander a little bit in that second half, but then when we got to the finale, it was like, whoa. Not gonna spoil it, but fuck, that really blew my mind. I thought that was an amazing finale. And yes, I know all the people who played the video game already knew about it because it was modeled off the video game. They're like, haha, saw this one coming. But whatever. It was really good. And so that's what pushes it all the way up to number 5 for me. So now I will get into my number 4, which have a bit of a recency bias off that because I just finished watching the final episode, which just came out today, of it, but it is What If Season 2. I think this is easily better than Season 1. Super impressed with What If this year. This is the kind of What If that I wanted from the beginning, because I have sort of a bias for the show because I want to like the show because I love the concept of there being a different parallel universe every episode and you explore it. Like, I used to love this comic when I was a kid for that reason. And season 1, I liked it because I wanted to like it, but really they did too many episodes about, oh, what if this character was that character? And then they had a couple really bad comedy episodes, or then they had this stupid freaking zombie episode, which didn't work for me at all. Whereas this season, there were no bad episodes. Even that silly Christmas episode was okay. It wasn't terrible. And that was probably my least favorite of the season. And so they had no bad episodes this season. Had some really great ones that introduced the character of Kaori, which I loved, and I loved that they brought it back. I actually loved that they brought back Captain Carter several times, and it was making her like a main staple of the What If universe. And I think the 2 episodes that ended out the season were stronger than the ones that ended out the season last year, even though the finale was a smidge bit rushed, and it was like, oh, super powered people with ridiculous amounts of power fighting each other, which does kind of bore me a bit when they do go over the top with that, but I don't think it was as rushed as the 2-part finale, or at least the finale of last year, because I thought, and I just watched that recently too, and I thought that was way rushed, and I just threw all these characters together, and they didn't really give them time to relate or for you to sell you as a team, whereas this year, you totally bought the relationship between Captain Carter and Doctor Strange Supreme and Kaori as well. Like, I think they really sold that, did a great job. Loved all the episodes of What If. So I will admit I'm predisposed to like this because I love the concept, but I think they did the concept way better this year. So I was a huge fan. So that is my number 4. What If Season 2. So now we will get into my number 3 favorite show of the year, and that is Ahsoka Season 1. And again, this is another one I don't care what all the naysayers say about this, whining, complaining about this show. Now, I will say, the one thing I will say about the show is that it was on track to be my number 1, but then the last 3 episodes were kind of a letdown. Particularly the finale wasn't nearly as strong as I was hoping it would be. I really was extremely unhappy with the fact that they ended the season open-ended. I think that it should have been more. They didn't need to tie up everything and end the story, but they needed to have a more definitive ending for season 1, I believe. They didn't even answer what the hell Balin was looking for, and that bothered the hell out of me, especially knowing that the actor who played them had passed away. So that part of it, so the last 3 episodes weren't as strong as I hoped. They were still good. There were still some good moments in them, but that middle part of the season, particularly episodes 4 and 5, particularly episode 5, were fucking amazing. They were pure gold. The episode 5 with Anakin is probably my favorite episode of the entire year of any show. I think it was a masterpiece. I think it was artistic. It was great, not just from a fan's perspective, but just great storytelling. And the first couple episodes, I think people were too negative on. I thought those were good as well. I was loving to see this conclusion or continuation of Rebels, and I think they did a fucking good job. And I don't think you needed to see Rebels to truly appreciate this show, but that's just my perspective. I have seen Rebels, so what do I know? Anyways, I loved Ahsoka. My number 3 really was on set to be my number 1, but the fact that the finale kind of let me down pushed it back to number 3. So we will get into my number 2, a show that came out earlier this year, but I didn't watch until just a couple months ago because I hadn't heard of it. But I was looking up, like, trying to find more shows to watch, like what shows are really good, and a lot of people recommended this show. Watched the trailer for it, looked interesting, so I watched it, loved it, and that show is Beef. The Netflix show with the dude who played Glenn from The Walking Dead and the comedian, stand-up comedian Ali Wong, who were, by the way, both amazing in this show. They both, like, all the performances in this show were absolutely amazing. And then I love how each show ended with, like, a certain, like, 90s alternative rock song from that had that theme, like, matched the episode. And what really, really won me over is the song they chose in the finale was Mayonnaise by the Smashing Pumpkins, which I, of course, love the Smashing Pumpkins, and that brings back a lot of nostalgia. And yeah, it was a really, really artistic show. I mean, on the surface, it's about two people getting a road rage incident, and then they're trying to ruin each other's lives. Made me think of that movie Changing Lanes. And at first, I gotta admit, like, in the mid part of the season, I was getting a little bored with it, and I was like, this is too much, too simple of a premise to try to stretch out over an entire, like, season of television. But then by the time we get to the end of the season, they really justify it and they really bring it back together. Now, the last 2 episodes are a little over the top. Maybe I shouldn't even say a little. They are a lot over the top. So you have to kind of suspend disbelief a lot and just go with it and see it as more metaphorical and sometimes than literal. And you know what? When I watched the penultimate episode and it had this ending, and I was like, my heart sunk because I didn't keep track of how many episodes I watched, and I was like, that better not be the last episode, like, because I would be so pissed off. That would be so pretentious if they chose to end that show there. But thankfully, that wasn't the last episode. There was one more episode which I thought was a fucking masterpiece that really tied everything together. It was, again, very tongue-in-cheek, very metaphorical, but more so than literal. But I don't like buy theories that they're, like, dead or whatever in the final episode. I think it really happened, but you just have to go with the ridiculousness of it. But yeah, and I've heard that there were some people online who thought that the show should have ended with the second to last episode. My God, do I disagree with them. In fact, I watched a video essay on someone who's saying if you believe that, you kind of miss the point of the show. And I agree with that, actually, because that finale really, like, tied everything together and made everything, like, justified the entire show's existence. So yeah, absolutely loved this show. We'll probably watch it again. It's up there with Maniac for one of my favorite one-off Netflix shows. The one-season shows, the limited series, or whatever the fuck they call them. I thought it was a damn good one. Anyway, we will now get into my number 1 favorite show of 2023, and that is easily Loki's Season 2. I liked Loki Season 1. It was one of my favorite. I think it was in my top 5 of my top 10 the year it came out. But I was thinking, oh, it's, I still said I was on the record saying I liked WandaVision better, so I wasn't as big of a fan of the Loki season 1 as some people are. And then I hear some people say that they prefer Loki season 1 over season 2, and I totally and utterly disagree with that. I think season 2 is much better than season 1. This really, really sold me. Like, season 1 had a couple episodes I was kind of iffy about that were kind of boring or whatever, but pretty much every episode of season 2 sold me. I think the only one that was kind of just a tad bit bored with was the one where they went back in time and met Timely or whatever. That dragged a little bit, but it was still a great episode. It was still an amazing episode. And then what they did in the second half of the season blew my mind. It was pure gold. It reminded me of the best of shows that came before it, like The Leftovers, because they really did take risks. In this case, the risks paid off in a huge ways. Like, they took the story in directions that I definitely had no idea that they would take this show in. And I do think it's a tad bit inconsistent with season 1. I do get the impression they kind of changed direction for this season, but I'm okay with that because they did such an amazing job. Like, there was the character stories they told, particularly with Loki and Sylvie, and even the other characters like Mobius and the other characters there were just so solid. And freaking OB, Ouroboros, as a new character was absolutely amazing. And this show is is also a bit tongue-in-cheek and a bit comedic at times, but in a good way, in a way that works with the story, that makes it make a lot more sense. And Miss Minutes is fucking psychopath. And they really made her scary in this season. That was so good. But particularly the last 2 episodes were, I think, amazing. They were gold. Pure gold. I don't want to give away spoilers, but they really went in directions that were unique and reminded me of the best television ever. And the ending itself just blew my mind. And the music, oh my god, speaking of music, the music for this show was so damn good. It's so good. I always liked the opening theme for Loki. But yeah, they even made it even better this season. God, I'm probably going to watch this season several more times. It is one of my favorite, probably going to end up being one of my favorite seasons of all time. All television. Amazing season. Loki Season 2. So yeah, this is probably the first time number 1 on my list is not The Expanse, because this is the first top 10 where there wasn't an Expanse season. Because you might say, oh, The Expanse came out 2 years ago. But no, it was like at the end of 2021, so it was eligible for my 2022 one. But anyway, yeah, so it was like, without The Expanse, what would fill the void? It turns out it's Loki Season 2. Freaking amazing. Absolutely loved it. No, who said this? Is why I was like, people who say that the MCU is dying and Marvel is dying or whatever is full of shit. We got What If Season 2, my number 4, and Loki Season 2, my number 1. I think the MCU is just as strong as ever, and the Marvels was actually a lot better than a lot of people say it was, but that's in the movies. I'm talking about shows. But anyway, that's it. That is it for my top 10 favorite shows of 2023. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to check out my channel as I do many more videos and many other things. Speaking of What If Season 2, I will be releasing my review for that show hopefully tomorrow, and maybe doing a live stream for that sometime soon. And I got lots of other videos coming at you with other shows I mentioned, particularly talking about Star Trek, of course, on my channel, covering Star Trek Next Generation, one episode at a time, currently in Season 3, and doing many other videos on many other shows as well, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.